extension. You mentioned we're looking at ways to pay for it. So the president, I know we've gone over this before, but the president would be willing to sign an extension that does not include a tax increase on millionaires, correct?
Well, again, I'm not going to negotiate either ors or what provisions have to be in or what have to be out. There are some principles here that need to be observed. One is, it makes no sense to pass into law a payroll tax cut for working and middle-class Americans and have it paid for in a way that hurts working and middle-class Americans. That's just bad policy, and the president would not support that.
You mentioned principles at stake, and I'm just curious now. I mean, the president was willing to sign a 2-year extension of the Bush tax cuts, which benefit the wealthiest Americans. You're now sort of, you continue to push the door open and wider open to allowing a pay-for that does not include taxing millionaires. If the president's willing to give up on that, what principle are you holding fast and firm on?
Give up on what? Here's the thing. It bears remembering that last year the president and Congress reached an agreement that included extension of the Bush tax cuts, because the only deal that was available to the president included extending all of the Bush tax cuts, including the ones for the wealthy. He was for extending the ones for the middle class, and he was not willing to see middle class Americans, as we were in a very fragile period economically, have their taxes raised substantially. That's the principle he's applying in this case too, to not wanting 160 million Americans to see their taxes go up by, on average, $1,000 next year.
But the president is making a big show of his principles. I mean, he gave a big speech, as you well know, about fairness, asking the wealthier to pay more. What actions has he taken that show that he is standing on that principle? If he's going to sign a payroll tax cut extension, that the Republicans will not include increasing taxes on millionaires.
First of all, you're projecting into the future something that I have not said. All I have said is I'm not going to negotiate the particulars of a potential agreement, except to say that, to make clear that the proposal that the House Republicans put forward is objectionable, not acceptable for a variety of reasons, including that it violates the very budget agreement that we reached in August, which, by the way, brings us down to the lowest level of non-defense discretionary spending since Eisenhower was president. Substantial discretionary spending cuts. And that he's not going to accept a deal that puts the onus on the very middle class and working Americans who were trying to help with this tax cut, and only would do that because Republicans refuse to ask corporations to give up their subsidies or their loopholes, or the wealthiest to pay a little bit extra. So these are very important principles that go right to the heart of why we are even talking about cutting taxes for middle-class Americans.
Why doesn't the president issue a veto threat that he will not sign a payroll tax cut extension if it does not include a tax hike on millionaires?
I understand that you want to maybe get this wrapped up quickly so we can all go on vacation, or that there are a lot of unknowns here in terms of how this endgame will play out. The president's enunciated his principles very clearly. He's made clear what he will not sign and what he will reject. Senator Reid has made clear that this thing has no chance of getting through the Senate. It's very important that the Congress get down to serious business to ensure that they don't go home having to explain why they just raised everybody's taxes. So the president's going to make, going to adhere to his principles and ensure that this gets done.
And then on the small businesses, the 1% of small businesses that would be affected by the increased tax on millionaires, would the president then be willing to support Senator Claire McCaskill's provision that would exempt that 1% of small businesses who would be taxed additionally?
Well, I think, again, rather than me negotiate individual elements of a compromise that does not at this point exist, I would go back to what I said about how thin a reed that is as a reason to oppose what the American people broadly support. And the irony of the 1% of the less than 1% of small businesses who might be affected by asking millionaires and billionaires to pay a little bit more, is that that's including a broad definition of small businesses, which means law partnerships or hedge fund managers or things like that who file business income as personal income. So these are not mom and pop businesses we're talking about. On Main Street,
Law firms that are filing as subchapter S's?
partnerships, or subchapter something, yes. I didn't take the accounting class.